To understand the magnitude of what I lost, you have to understand that I didn't just plant flowers. I curated a living museum. I am a 34-year-old botanist. For the last 5 years, my backyard has been my laboratory and my church. I specialize in heritage roses, breeds that date back to the 18th and 19th centuries. These aren't the generic red roses you buy at the grocery store. These are delicate, complex, highly temperamental plants that require specific soil pH, precise pruning, and a lot of patience. I had over 40 bushes. My pride and joy was a rare Gloire de Dijon climber I imported from France, which covered the back trellis in a cascade of creamy orange petals. It took me 3 years just to get it to bloom. The garden was appraised last year by a local horticultural society at around $25,000 in plant value alone, not counting the thousands of hours of labor. Then there is my neighbor, Linda, 60 SF. Linda hates nature. She is the type of person who vacuums her astroturf. Since I moved in, she has complained about everything. Your bees are trespassing on my airspace. The smell of your flowers is giving my poodle a headache. Petals are blowing onto my driveway. I tried to be nice. I installed a barrier fence. I offered her bouquets. She threw them in the trash. Nothing worked. She wanted a concrete slab next door, not a garden. Yesterday, I left for work at 8 a.m. The garden was in full bloom. It was breathtaking. I came home at 5:30 p.m. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed something odd. The air didn't smell like sweet roses. It smelled like crushed stems and raw earth. I walked around the side of the house to the backyard gate. It was wide open. I stepped through, and my knees actually buckled. I had to grab the fence post to keep from falling. My sanctuary was gone. It looked like a bomb had gone off. The trellis was ripped down, splintered into pieces. The Gloire de Dijon was hacked to the root, its beautiful vines tangled in a heap of green waste. Every single bush had been chopped down. Not pruned, chopped. Stems that were 3 inches thick, representing years of growth, were severed jaggedly near the dirt. And there, standing in the middle of the massacre, was Linda. She was wearing gardening gloves and holding a pair of heavy-duty commercial hedge trimmers. She was sweating, red-faced, and looking incredibly satisfied with herself. She noticed me standing there, paralyzed by shock. She didn't look guilty. She wiped her forehead and smiled. "Oh, you're home," she called out, waving the trimmers. "Good timing. I'm almost done." What? I couldn't even form a sentence. My brain was short-circuiting. "What did you do?" "I fixed it," she announced, gesturing to the pile of dead, rare plants that represented 5 years of my life. "I finally cleaned up this mess. It was looking so overgrown and unruly. I figured since you clearly didn't have the time to maintain it properly, I would be a good neighbor and help you out. Look how much open space you have now." I looked at the stumps. I looked at the crushed petals ground into the mud by her boots. I looked at the sheer violence of it. "You killed them," I whispered. "You killed everything." "Don't be dramatic," she scoffed, kicking a severed rose head. "It's just weeds, OP. Now you can put down some nice gravel or maybe a gazebo. You're welcome." I stood there, the smell of plant death filling my lungs, and realized she truly believed she was the hero of this story. "Get out." I screamed. My voice broke. I sounded like a wild animal. I lunged toward her, stopping only a few feet away because I was afraid if I got any closer, I would grab the hedge trimmers from her hands and throw them over the fence. Linda didn't flinch. She just sighed, resting the heavy trimmers on her hip like a weapon. "Stop screeching, OP," she said calmly. "The neighbors will think you're unstable. Look, I know change is hard, but you'll see. In a week, when you have a nice, clean lawn, you'll thank me." "Thank you." I pointed a shaking finger at the mutilated stump of the Gloire de Dijon. That rose was 150 years old. I imported it from France. It was worth more than your car. Linda rolled her eyes. "Oh, please." It was a vine. It was messy. It looked like something out of a horror movie, crawling all over the wall. It was a climber. I yelled. It was supposed to do that. "Well, it was attracting bees," she said, sniffing disdainfully. "I saw a bee near my porch yesterday. My grandchildren visit sometimes. Do you want my grandchildren to go into anaphylactic shock? Your gardening hobby was a public health hazard. Your grandchildren live in Ohio. I shouted. They visit once a year. You destroyed my property because of a hypothetical bee. It's not just the bees, she interrupted, stepping over the carcass of a David Austin Juliet rose. It's the property value. I'm thinking of refinancing, and having a jungle next door brings down the aesthetic of the entire street. I did this for everyone. I'm improving the neighborhood. I looked at the devastation. It didn't look like an improvement. It looked like a war zone. The sap was bleeding out of the cut stems. The ground was littered with thousands of dying petals. You trespassed, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You entered my gated backyard without permission and destroyed my property. That is a crime, Linda. I didn't trespass, she scoffed. The gate was unlocked. And I'm your neighbor. Neighbors help neighbors. Honestly, you should be paying me for the labor. This took me 3 hours. My back is killing me. She actually waited for a moment, as if expecting me to pull out my wallet. You are insane, I said. And you are ungrateful, she snapped. I toil away in the hot sun to fix your mess, and you yell at me. Fine. Be that way. But don't come crying to me when the HOA sends you a thank you note for finally cleaning this up. We don't have an HOA. I screamed. We should, she muttered, to keep people like you in line. She turned around and marched toward the gate, dragging the trimmers behind her. She stopped at the property line and looked back at me. You can mulch the rest, she instructed. It'll make good fertilizer for the grass you're going to plant. She slammed the gate shut. I stood there in the silence. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the graveyard of my passion. I walked over to the Gloria de Dijon. I picked up a severed branch. The buds were just about to open. I fell to my knees in the dirt. I cried. I cried for the time, for the beauty, and for the sheer, wanton cruelty of it. But as I knelt there, holding the dead rose, my sadness began to harden. It calcified into something cold and heavy. I wiped my face with my dirty hand. Linda thought she had pruned some bushes. She didn't realize she had just committed a felony. And she didn't know that in the world of horticulture, tree and plant law is a terrifyingly expensive branch of the legal system. I pulled out my phone. I didn't call a landscaper. I called the police. And then I called my lawyer. The police officer who took the report was sympathetic, but he told me what I expected. It's a civil matter for the damages, but I can cite her for criminal trespass. He went next door. I watched from my window as he handed Linda a citation. She screamed at him, waving her hands, pointing at my house. He just wrote it down and left. That was the appetizer. The main course was the lawsuit. I called a forensic arborist and a specialized landscape appraiser. Yes, those exist. And they are expensive, but worth every penny. They spent 2 days in my backyard. They catalogued every stump. They took soil samples. They looked at my receipts and my gardening logs, which I kept meticulously. Because the plants were mature, some over 5 years old, some transplanted and much older, you can't just value them at the cost of a seedling from Home Depot. You have to value them at the cost of replacing them with a plant of equal size and age. Replacing a mature, imported climbing rose isn't $20. It's $1,500. The total appraisal for the plant material, soil remediation, and labor came to $28,400. But here is the kicker. In my state, malicious destruction of timber or plants on another person's property entitles the victim to treble damages. That means triple the value. My lawyer drafted the suit. We were asking for $85,200. The service. We didn't mail it. I paid a process server to hand it to her while she was washing her car in the driveway. I was gardening, or trying to clear the debris, in the front yard. I wanted to see her face. The server handed her the thick envelope. She tore it open, wiping her soapy hands on her pants. She read the first page. Her knees actually gave out. She slumped against her car. $80,000, she shrieked. For weeds. She looked over at me. You're crazy. You're trying to scam me. I'll countersue for harassment. See you in court, Linda, I said, putting a bag of dead rose stems into the bin. The court case. She didn't countersue. She tried to claim to her insurance company that it was an accident, but the police report, criminal trespass, voided her liability coverage for intentional acts. She was on her own. In court, her lawyer looked tired. He tried to argue that the plants were overgrown and she was abating a nuisance. My lawyer put the appraiser on the stand. He explained the rarity of the Gloria de Dijon. He showed photos of the garden in bloom, photos that proved it was a manicured paradise, not a jungle. The judge looked at the photos. Then he looked at the photos of the stumps. The judge said to Linda, "You entered a fenced property and destroyed an asset that took 5 years to build. You did it because you didn't like the aesthetic. That is not a defense. That is malice." The verdict: judgment for the plaintiff in the amount of $85,200. Linda started hyperventilating. "I have to sell my house. I'm retired." "Then you shouldn't have touched my roses," the judge said. The aftermath: she did have to sell her house. She downsized to a condo in a different town, one with a very strict HOA that I'm sure hates her already. I used the settlement money to hire a professional landscape architect. We rebuilt the garden. It's even better now. I installed a 6-foot privacy fence with a locking gate. The new neighbors are great. They love the smell of the roses. Sometimes, when I'm pruning the new climbers, I think about Linda. I think about how much she hated nature. And I smile, because in the end, nature won. And it presented her with a very, very large bill.